There's something deeply noble about the human instinct to help. We're wired for connection, for empathy, for service. We're raised to believe that helping others is not only a virtue, it's a responsibility. And most of the time, that's true. But today, I want to talk about something uncomfortable, something we don't often say out loud. There are people in your life, yes, in your life, that you should never help. Not because they're bad, but not because you don't care, because helping them might actually hurt you. And worse, it might hurt them too. Let's be clear, I'm not talking about turning your back on someone in need. I'm talking about patterns. I'm talking about choices. I'm talking about protecting your purpose, your mental health, and your energy. Because if we constantly give to people who misuse our help, we drain our potential and rob them of the opportunity to grow. So here are 8 types of people you should twice before helping. 1, the chronic victim. This is the person who always has a story. Life is always unfair to them. Everyone else is to blame. Nothing is their fault. And every time you try to help, it turns into emotional quicksand. Your support doesn't lift them up, it pulls you both down. Because they don't want solutions, they want sympathy. They want someone to validate their helplessness. Helping them doesn't empower, it enables. 2, the manipulator, they know exactly what buttons to press. They use guilt as a weapon, charm as a disguise, and neediness as a strategy. They don't want your help, they want your compliance. And if you keep giving in, you train yourself to betray your own boundaries. Helping this person teaches them that manipulation works, and it teaches you that your values can be negotiated. 3, the complainer who never acts. We all vent sometimes, but there's a difference between a temporary frustration and a lifestyle of inaction. These people are always unhappy, always criticizing, always stuck. You offer advice, encouragement, resources, but nothing ever changes. Helping them doesn't lead to progress. It leads to a cycle. And over time, it becomes clear they don't want to change, they just want to complain. 4, the energy vampire, you know the one. After 10 minutes with them, you feel like you've run a marathon with bricks on your back. They take and take and take, and you give thinking you're doing the right thing. But they're not interested in mutual growth. They're not building anything with you. They're feeding off you. And if you're not careful, they will drain your energy, your clarity, and your drive. 5, the arrogant no. This person doesn't ask for help. They demand it, and they do it with an air of superiority. They think they deserve your time, your resources, your attention, but they offer no gratitude, no humility, and no willingness to learn. Helping them isn't an act of kindness. It becomes an act of ego management. And your generosity turns into a fuel for their entitlement. 6, the repeater of mistakes. Mistakes are part of learning. But when someone keeps making the same ones, despite guidance, support, and second chances, you have to ask, are they learning or are they just leaning on you? Your help becomes a safety net for their irresponsibility. You're not helping them grow. You're shielding them from consequences that might finally teach them something. 7, the toxic reactor. Every time you try to help, they twist your intentions. They accuse you, question your motives, or lash out. These people are emotionally unpredictable. They don't receive help. They weaponize it. And if you keep helping, you're not just risking frustration. You're risking your peace, because kindness offered to the wrong person can come back as a personal attack. 8, the envious underminer. This one is subtle. They smile in public, but secretly resent your success. When you help them, it feels good at first. But over time, you realize they use your support to compete with you, criticize you, or quietly sabotage you. They don't want your help to grow. They want to use your help to prove something. And often that something is your own downfall. These are hard truths. They go against the grain of everything we're taught about compassion and generosity. But boundaries are not cruelty. They are clarity. Knowing who not to help is just as important as knowing when to help. It's not selfish, it's responsible, because your energy is not infinite. Your purpose is not disposable, and your help should be an investment, not a sacrifice. If you truly want to live a life of impact, you must stop pouring into cups that leak. Redirect your energy to people who are ready, willing, and able to rise. That's where your help becomes transformational, not transactional. That's where your life becomes a force for growth, not just a bandage for dysfunction. 5 keynotes from the speech, helping without discernment can cause more harm than good to both you and the other person. Beware of those who use your kindness as a tool for manipulation or dependency. Your energy and time are valuable. Invest them in people committed to growth, not in repeated patterns of dysfunction. Setting boundaries is not selfish. It is a necessary act of protecting your purpose. True help empowers others to rise, not rely. It creates change, not cycles. Helping without discernment can cause more harm than good to both you and the other person. It's a concept that challenges the traditional idea of unconditional generosity, but it's rooted in emotional intelligence and long-term thinking. We are conditioned to believe that offering help is inherently good. And most of the time, that's true. But when you help someone without evaluating the situation, without asking whether your help is truly needed, welcomed, or beneficial, you might end up creating unintended consequences that set everyone back. Imagine trying to rescue someone who's not actually drowning, but just refuses to swim. You jump in with the best intentions. You reach out, you offer your hand, but instead of being pulled to safety, they drag you under. That's what it feels like when we help without discernment. Our empathy overrides our judgment, and we fail to ask a crucial question: is this help going to make things better or worse? When someone constantly sees themselves as a victim and refuses to take accountability, your help becomes a crutch. Rather than empowering them to rise above their situation, your repeated interventions may reinforce their learned helplessness. They come to depend on you instead of developing their own resilience. They begin to expect your support rather than earning their progress. And instead of encouraging strength, you're unintentionally fostering weakness. In that moment, your kindness turns into a trap for them and for you. There's also the issue of identity. Every time you help someone who refuses to help themselves, you risk anchoring your own sense of worth in being the rescuer. You start measuring your value by how much you do for others, even when it's damaging. You build an identity based on sacrifice, not service. And what begins as an act of compassion gradually becomes a pattern of emotional codependency. You lose clarity about where your responsibility ends and the other person's begins. And it's not just emotional harm. There's practical harm too. Time, energy, money, these are finite resources. When you consistently give them to people who misuse or abuse your support, those resources don't just vanish. They're taken away from the people and causes that truly need them. You end up unavailable for the right people because you're overcommitted to the wrong ones. You burn out, you grow bitter, and your ability to give from a place of love and clarity gets replaced by frustration and fatigue. Helping without discernment can also enable destructive behavior. If someone makes poor choices and always finds you there to clean up the mess, what incentive do they have to change? Why should they learn accountability if they know you'll bail them out every time? In trying to protect them from consequences, you might be delaying the very growth that those consequences are designed to produce. It's painful to watch someone fall, but sometimes that fall is exactly what they need to finally rise. There's also a deeper issue at play: permission. Every time you help someone who hasn't asked for help, who hasn't shown a willingness to change, or who resents your involvement, you cross a subtle boundary. You assume responsibility for their path, their pain, their progress. But the truth is, you can't carry someone to a destination they don't want to reach. No matter how good your intentions, help without invitation can feel invasive, even controlling. And when your efforts are rejected or ignored, it's not just discouraging, it's demoralizing. Helping should be intentional. It should be rooted in awareness, not impulse. It requires listening, observing, asking questions, and sometimes waiting. It requires the courage to say no when needed, to walk away from people who are not ready to change, and to resist the urge to fix things just to feel useful. True help uplifts. It creates space for ownership. It strengthens the person receiving it and preserves the well-being of the person offering it. Helping without discernment isn't a sign of compassion. It's a lack of boundaries disguised as kindness. And without those boundaries, we don't just risk wasting our efforts. We risk damaging the very relationships we're trying to protect. We create dependence instead of growth, confusion instead of clarity, harm instead of healing. So before you extend your hand, take a moment to ask, is this truly help? Or am I just filling a gap that someone else must learn to close themselves? Because sometimes the most helpful thing you can do is to step back and allow people to find their own strength. Beware of those who use your kindness as a tool for manipulation or dependency. At first glance, it might seem generous, even noble, to offer help to anyone who asks. But the reality is that not everyone who asks for your help actually needs it in the way you think. Some people have learned to weaponize empathy. They know how to present their situation in a way that tugs at your heart. They use guilt, flattery, urgency, or subtle emotional tactics to make you feel responsible for their struggles. And before you know it, your well-intentioned help becomes a pattern, not of support, but of control. Manipulators often don't come across as forceful or aggressive. They're subtle. They make you feel special for helping, needed, even heroic. But underneath that surface, they are calculating. They've identified your soft spots, your compassion, your fear of disappointing others, your desire to be seen as good, and they use those traits to get what they want. It might be your time, your money, your energy, your access, or simply your attention. And the scariest part, they don't necessarily do it with malice. Some people manipulate without even realizing it. It's how they've learned to survive. But that doesn't make the effect any less damaging. You might find yourself saying yes to things you don't have time for. You might notice that you're constantly adjusting your priorities to accommodate their needs. You might even start neglecting your own boundaries or relationships because you feel obligated to help this one person who always seems to be in crisis. That's not generosity. That's emotional hijacking. And over time, it chips away at your self-trust. You begin to question your own instincts. You wonder if you're being selfish by saying no. You second-guess your decisions even when you know something feels off. Manipulation thrives in the absence of clarity. When you're unsure about your own boundaries or unclear about someone's intentions, you become more vulnerable to being used. A manipulator will take advantage of that ambiguity. They'll make small requests at first, things that seem harmless. But then the ask grows, the expectations rise, the guilt intensifies, and the moment you try to pull back or reclaim your space, they react, sometimes with passive-aggressive behavior, sometimes with silence, sometimes with outright anger. Because to them, your boundaries are a threat to their access. Dependency is the long-term consequence of this pattern. Once someone realizes they can rely on you to solve their problems, they stop trying to solve them on their own. And it happens gradually. They call you before they make decisions. They lean on you during every setback. They expect you to intervene, to provide, to rescue. And the more you comply, the more they come to believe that they can't function without you. You become their emotional safety net, not because they truly can't manage, but because they've convinced themselves they shouldn't have to. Your help, instead of building them up, keeps them stagnant. It's important to understand that helping someone doesn't mean becoming their source of strength. Real support empowers the other person to grow, to become more independent, to make better choices. But manipulators don't want independence, they want influence. They want control over how you show up in their life, even if it's at the expense of your well-being. They'll play on your fears of being cold, of being uncaring, of being judged. And if you're not aware, you'll respond not from strength, but from pressure. The reason this dynamic is so dangerous is because it doesn't always look toxic at first. In fact, it often looks like a close bond. It can be disguised as friendship, mentorship, partnership, or even family loyalty. But the common thread is this: your role in the relationship is always to give, and theirs is always to receive. When that balance is never questioned, you begin to lose sight of what healthy support really means. You start to think that being drained is just part of being helpful. That self-sacrifice is the cost of being kind. But that belief is how manipulation thrives. It conditions you to see depletion as virtue and compliance as compassion. To help someone in a meaningful way, you need to see them clearly, not just their situation, but their intentions. Are they trying to grow, or are they trying to control? Are they asking for guidance, or are they expecting rescue? And most importantly, are you offering your help freely, or because you're afraid of what will happen if you don't? These questions aren't cold. They're necessary, because kindness should never be a tool in someone else's strategy. It should be a force for freedom, not a pathway to entrapment. Your energy and time are valuable. Invest them in people committed to growth, not in repeated patterns of dysfunction. This isn't about judgment, it's about responsibility. You only have so much bandwidth in your life. Every hour, every conversation, every emotional investment is a resource. And where you choose to spend it will determine not only your own trajectory, but the ripple effect of impact you leave behind. So many well-meaning people spend their lives giving their best to people who aren't ready, who aren't willing, and sometimes who don't even want to change. And the result isn't transformation, it's exhaustion. There are people who speak the language of progress, but live the reality of stagnation. They know all the right things to say. They'll tell you they want to improve, to change their habits, to fix their relationships, to grow. But when it comes to action, there's no movement. It's all talk. And what happens is you get pulled into a loop. You find yourself having the same conversations again and again. You offer support, you give advice, you provide tools. And yet, next week, they're in the exact same spot, sometimes even worse. This cycle doesn't just waste your time, it chips away at your belief in people's potential. It's tempting to believe that if you just try harder, if you explain it better, show more patience, invest a little more, they'll finally get it. But that's the trap, because in your desire to help, you start over-functioning. You start doing the emotional work they should be doing themselves. You carry both your weight and theirs. And in doing so, you send a silent message: you don't have to move, I'll do it for you. That message, while unspoken, becomes the foundation of the relationship, and it leads nowhere. Not because you didn't care enough, but because they didn't commit enough. Change requires discomfort. Growth demands sacrifice. People who are genuinely committed to progress are willing to confront hard truths, to do things differently, to take ownership of their choices. When someone isn't willing to face their own patterns, no amount of external help can substitute for internal willingness. You can offer the map, but they have to walk the path. And if they refuse, your continued effort doesn't empower them. It enables their avoidance. There's also a psychological toll in constantly investing in the wrong places. You start to question your own instincts. You may begin to feel ineffective or discouraged. And worst of all, you become desensitized to your own burnout. You normalize feeling drained, tired, frustrated, thinking it's just part of being a good person. But real contribution doesn't come from depletion. It comes from clarity. It comes from discernment. Knowing when to walk alongside someone and when to step back isn't cold, it's wise. Repeated dysfunction often hides behind surface level charm, excuses, or emotional dependency. Some people don't want to get better. They want to be taken care of. They've built their identity around struggle, chaos, or crisis. And when you step in to help, you unintentionally become part of that pattern. They lean on you instead of leaning into growth. They rely on your stability rather than cultivating their own. And as long as you're always available, they have no reason to change. Your life is your message. How you use your energy teaches others how to value theirs. If you consistently invest in people who are not doing the work, not showing up, not growing, then you're modeling a message of tolerance for mediocrity and stuckness. But if you choose instead to align with people who are hungry for growth, who take responsibility, who try, fail, learn, and get back up, you become part of something regenerative. Your support becomes fuel for momentum, not a cushion for avoidance. It's also important to recognize that the time you spend pouring into the wrong people is time stolen from those who are genuinely ready. There are people out there who would take your advice and run with it, who would take your belief in them and turn it into action. But they can't find you because you're entangled in cycles that go nowhere. By freeing yourself from those patterns, you create space for new, meaningful, Reciprocal relationships that actually elevate both sides. Not everyone wants to grow, and that's okay. But if you're someone who values forward motion, you have to be honest about where you're placing your effort. Are you planting seeds in fertile soil, or are you watering ground that has no intention of supporting life? Helping someone who isn't helping themselves may feel noble, but it doesn't lead to change. It only leads to frustration. Choose instead to give where your energy multiplies, where your investment isn't just appreciated, but matched with action. That's where your time becomes transformation. Setting boundaries is not selfish. It is a necessary act of protecting your purpose. Too often, people equate boundaries with rejection or distance, when in truth, boundaries are about clarity, alignment, and sustainability. Without them, even your best intentions can become distorted. When you don't set boundaries, your life is open to anyone's agenda, anyone's urgency, anyone's emotional chaos. And over time, the absence of boundaries doesn't just exhaust you, it begins to erode your identity. You start to forget what matters to you because you've spent so much time responding to what matters to everyone else. People who struggle with boundaries often carry a deep desire to be helpful, to be needed, to be accepted. But that desire can become a trap. If you're constantly saying yes out of fear, fear of disappointing others, fear of conflict, fear of seeming rude, you are not making choices from a place of purpose. You're making them from a place of survival. And when your choices are fear-based, they don't serve you. They drain you. They place you in situations that do not honor your values, your priorities, or your well-being. Boundaries are how you communicate what you stand for. They're how you protect your time, your energy, your emotional bandwidth. When you set a boundary, you're not pushing people away. You're showing them how to have a healthy relationship with you. You're saying, this is where I begin, and this is where I end. This is what I can give, and this is what I can't. And the people who respect that are the ones who truly belong in your life. The ones who don't, well, their resistance is usually a sign that they were benefiting from your lack of boundaries more than they were honoring your well-being. When you help people without boundaries, you start to absorb their problems as if they are your own. You take responsibility for things that don't belong to you. You rearrange your schedule, compromise your priorities, even sacrifice your peace, all to keep others comfortable. And while it may seem generous in the moment, it's not sustainable. You cannot pour into others from an empty cup. You cannot be a source of strength to someone else when you're constantly depleted yourself. There is nothing noble about burning yourself out in the name of kindness. Some people will test your boundaries. They'll question them, push them, or ignore them entirely. They'll frame your limits as unfair, cold, or selfish. But that's often because they were benefiting from your lack of boundaries. They're not mad at your boundary. They're mad that they now have to take responsibility for themselves. They have to find another source of energy, validation, or support. And that's okay. Their discomfort is not your burden. You are not responsible for how someone reacts to your limits. You are only responsible for enforcing them with consistency and compassion. Setting boundaries doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care enough to stay healthy. It means you care enough to show up fully present, not resentful or stretched too thin. It means you understand that real service is not about constant sacrifice. It's about alignment. When you operate from a place of alignment, your yes means something. It's not forced. It's not rooted in guilt. It's a genuine offering given freely and powerfully. And when you say no, it's not rejection. It's redirection toward your values, your goals, your deeper calling. The people who truly respect and care about you won't disappear when you set boundaries. In fact, boundaries often deepen relationships. They create structure, they reduce confusion, they invite mutual respect. When both people in a relationship are clear on what's okay and what's not, trust conflict decreases. Communication becomes healthier. You stop second guessing yourself and you start honoring yourself. That shift changes everything. Boundaries also teach people how to grow. When you stop stepping in to fix every issue, when you stop saying yes to every need, you allow others to develop their own strength. You teach them that they are capable, that they can adapt, make decisions, and take responsibility. Your boundary becomes their growth edge. And while that process may be uncomfortable at first for both of you, it's what real empowerment looks like. Ultimately, boundaries are not about exclusion, they're about protection. They protect your time so you can focus. They protect your energy so you can create. They protect your emotional space so you can think clearly, love deeply, and live with purpose. Without boundaries, you become scattered, reactive, and overwhelmed. With boundaries, you become intentional, rooted, and effective. That's not selfish, that's necessary. Because you cannot lead, serve, or thrive if you are constantly betraying yourself to keep the peace. Boundaries are not barriers, they are bridges to a life of meaning, clarity, and contribution. True help empowers others to rise, not rely. It creates change, not cycles. There's a critical difference between support that uplifts and support that sustains dependency. Many people offer help with the purest of intentions. They want to make a difference. They want to ease someone's burden. They want to offer relief. But intention alone isn't enough. The impact of your help matters more than the effort behind it. If what you're offering leads someone to lean on you instead of stand on their own, then your help, no matter how generous, may be doing more harm than good. Empowering someone means you're giving them tools, not crutches. It means you're encouraging independence, resilience, and ownership. It doesn't mean removing all obstacles. It means walking with someone as they learn how to face those obstacles themselves. Too often, we step in and do the work for people. We solve problems they should be solving. We make decisions they should be making. We provide constant reassurance when what they really need is the confidence to believe in their own voice. And while this may feel kind in the short term, over time it robs people their potential. The most transformational help is the kind that makes you unnecessary over time. That's the test. If someone keeps needing you in the same way for the same issues with no forward movement, it's a sign your help is reinforcing a cycle, not creating growth. Growth isn't always comfortable. Empowerment can be painful. It asks people to confront their limitations, their patterns, and their excuses. And that's hard. It's easier to rely on someone else. It's easier to delegate responsibility. But lasting change only happens when a person claims ownership of their path. There's a psychological shift that happens when someone realizes they're capable. When they overcome a challenge themselves, even if it's small, the confidence they gain is exponential. It doesn't just solve one problem. It changes their entire approach to life. They begin to trust their instincts. They begin to take initiative. They start looking for solutions instead of saviors. That's what real help does. It moves people from helplessness to agency. It doesn't just fix the situation. It builds the person. When your help becomes a habit instead of a catalyst, it loses its power. If you're always the one picking someone up, they stop learning how to stand. If you always provide the answers, they stop asking the right questions. And if you constantly reassure them without challenging them to grow, they remain stuck in a mindset that limits their potential. This doesn't just affect them, it affects you. You become drained, resentful, and disillusioned. You wonder why your effort isn't leading to results. You question whether people really want to change. And sometimes you even pull back from helping anyone because you feel like it doesn't make a difference. But the truth is, your help does make a difference when it's aimed at the right target. When you help people who are ready, who are willing, who are open to growth, your investment multiplies. You become a spark that ignites momentum. Your words carry weight. Your actions inspire movement. And most importantly, the people you support begin to support themselves. And others, your help doesn't stop with them. It becomes a ripple effect that touches everyone they influence. That's the kind of help that transforms communities, not just individuals. It takes wisdom to know when to help and how to help. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is not step in. Sometimes it's allowing someone to feel the discomfort of their decisions so they can finally learn from them. Sometimes it's holding space without fixing, listening without advising, and trusting someone to rise in their own time. That doesn't mean abandoning them. It means believing in them enough to let them struggle, because struggle builds strength. And without strength, there's no real freedom. Helping someone rise doesn't mean you carry them. It means you walk beside them as they carry themselves. It means offering support with boundaries, guidance with humility, and presence without control. It means seeing the person not just as they are, but as they could be, and treating them, speaking to them, and investing in them based on that potential. That's what real help looks like. It sees beyond the moment. It builds for the future. It's not about keeping people comfortable. It's about making them capable. True help is a gift that leads to self-sufficiency. It does not create lifelong dependency. It does not repeat the same conversations, enable the same mistakes, or foster emotional reliance. It creates change, it challenges growth, and it leads people to discover the strength they never knew they had. That's the kind of help the world needs. That's the kind of help that lasts. The truth is, not everyone is meant to be helped, at least not in the way we often assume. When we extend our hand without discernment, when we ignore patterns, when we allow manipulation, enable inaction, or drain ourselves for people unwilling to grow, we don't serve, we sacrifice. Helping others should not come at the cost of your clarity, your energy, or your purpose. True service is intentional. It empowers, it builds, and it respects boundaries. It holds people accountable and calls them to rise, not rely. The strength of your impact doesn't lie in how many people you carry, it lies in how many you awaken. So be wise with your help. Give where it multiplies. Stand firm in your values. And remember, protecting your peace isn't selfish. It's what allows you to serve from a place of strength, not survival. Because when you help the right way, with the right people, for the right reasons, you don't just change lives. You elevate them, starting with your own.